Hello and welcome everybody. My name is William Red and I'm a TESOL instructor. And today we'll be talking about the different types of questions that you might see in the reading comprehension section of a TOEIC exam. This specific video is looking at the incomplete sentence questions. And this video is mostly for instructors or learners, right? Instructors who do not know how to approach teaching the TOEIC exam, especially the reading comprehension sections, or maybe for learners who want to understand what kinds of questions they might see during the exam or how to approach practicing and preparing, things of that nature. So without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. What I labeled this document as is an incomplete sentence deconstruction because there are a lot of different manuals out there to prepare for the TOEIC exam. This is a great example. Most of the questions come from this. This is TOEIC Listening and Reading Test, Prep Plus 2019 to 2020. It contains 4 practice tests, proven strategies, and online plus video, and it's by Kaplan. And a language center, if the university, or typically a university, if a university has that, they quite often have texts and manuals like this, but not everybody has access to those. And we'll find that the TOEIC is actually more predominantly used for business purposes. So if the learner is not taking the exam because they're doing a program through a university, maybe it's through a business or a company, in which case they might not have the same materials. Either way, one of the things that I noticed that was kind of a shortcoming or a downfall of this specific type of manual is that the questions in the practice exams are all mixed up. And so are the examples of this specific kind of question, right? It's not really clear other than stating that there are vocabulary-based questions and then there are grammar-based questions. What they're, really quizzing you on. What are they wanting to know that you know about the language system? So this document is set up into 5 different pages that target specific aspects of vocabulary or grammar. And instead of just grouping grammar into one big category, we're going to break that down further, right? So, example 1, in the fourth quarter of 2007, Taylor Airlines reported net blank of $82.5 million. Now, there are usually 4 options, sometimes 3, typically 4. So you have a 25% chance of getting the correct answer. Usually in a question like this, there are 3 options that are pretty similar, and then there's one option that's pretty off or too vague. So we have flights, which in this context is more closely related to Taylor Airlines. We have revenues, which is closer to $82.5 million. Services, which is kind of a midway point between Taylor Airlines and 82.5 million, but closer to the airlines. Then we have quantities, which really is more closely related to 82.5 million. So the semantic field is fairly similar, right? There's a little bit of overlap between the idea of what happens with airlines and general money. But right off of the bat, quantities is pretty general. So I would rule that one out. But depending on the reading comprehension level of the student, they might think that what the question is really asking for is a vocabulary word that is geared towards airlines and not really towards 82.5. And that's something we need to think about, right? Because revenues, quantities are in the same semantic field, and flights and services are in the same semantic field. So if the learner isn't really aware or their level isn't high enough, they might choose flights or services when the real answer is actually revenues, right? So in the fourth quarter of 2007, Taylor Airlines reported net revenues of $82.5 million. And this kind of jargon, this kind of language is typically learned in English for business purposes, a class like that. Here at the University of Lorraine, there is the doulas department and certificate. Programs like that help students with this kind of information. Question 2, a late payment blank of $25 will be applied to all accounts more than 30 days overdue. Again, another situation where all of the options are different words. The roots are completely different. They're connected by semantic field, but that's about it. So unless you really understand the jargon, you're not going to be able to say that in this context it's fee. In class, some students thought that it was cost, which is closely related to fee, but there is a slight difference between the two words. So we have 5 questions here on section A, and it's like that for all of these. In section B, another 5 questions. But instead of targeting specifically vocabulary, we're targeting something else. He was going to meet us blank at the restaurant or here. But, yet, neither, either, sometimes it's pronounced neither and either. What's going on here? What are they really asking for? It looks like vocabulary, but is that really what's going on? He was going to meet us, but at the restaurant or here? No. Yet, neither, could be. Either possibility. So, but and yet are more closely related. Neither and either are closely related. So some students chose neither. That's actually the incorrect response. It's actually either or either. And the reason why it's either in this context is because neither is associated with negation. And that's not really what's happening here. Either or, right? There's no negation. That would be neither nor. So maybe the student or learner is struggling with negation in this specific topic, or they're actually struggling with this specific grouping of grammar related features. There are several factors to think about blank, deciding which method of distribution to pursue. When, what, why, where. These are question words, right? But they're also, in this context, what? Conjunctions, right? So there are several factors to think about when deciding, which is actually the correct answer, what deciding. So even though they're question words and they're in the same semantic field, when is accurate here because deciding in the moment, so it's temporal, it's partly tense related. So when deciding which method of distribution to pursue, and that's connected to think about in the process of thinking about something. So maybe it's preposition based. Maybe the issue is conjugation based. Maybe the relationship is conjunctions and negation, or conjunctions and temporal phrases or words. This will help students understand what they're missing and why in this specific feature. Moving forward, the board of directors try to think blank all possible options before reaching a decision. What's going on? Of, at, by, as. It looks like vocabulary, just like the last one, but we know it's not. We know it's not vocabulary. The warehouse employees have worked overtime every day blank the last week. Until along before for. So these are prepositions, right? Of, at, by, as, until, along, before, for. So think of, think at, think by, think as. And this, to me, this question specifically targets Romance speakers, at least from my own experience. This isn't to say that other language systems don't use prepositions in this capacity, but it's connected to think. So in French, for example, it's penser à, right? Which would be at. So a native French speaker with a lower level of proficiency, or even a high level of proficiency but struggles with prepositions, might get this question wrong. Same thing with the Spanish speaker, pensar en, right? To think in something, to think by, to think of, right? So this is the type of question designed for non-native speakers to see what their level of proficiency is in English. Same with question 2. The warehouse employees have worked overtime every day until the last week. Understanding a temporal factor, right? Until, along, before, for. Just keep going through this specific section and then you can target what specifically you're struggling with, dealing with that specific grammatical feature. And D is very similar, right? The long-time employee was faithful and blank. The long-time employee was honestly, the long-time employee was honest, honor, honesty. This is different, right? Because the words, the options, they all have the same root, honest, honor, connection in the same semantic field. Whereas the suffixes are different, the ends, right? So li, or no suffix, right? So then we have adjective, or we have noun. And this can also be tricky because in this context, was honest. Honest, is it functioning as an adjective? What is it doing? So this specific grouping of questions, I call these morphology or conjugation. because it is connected to that, and it deals with adjectives, adverbs, conjugation of words, basically manipulation of a specific word, right? In this case, it is honest. The longtime employee was faithful and honest, and this is because of parallelism in a way, right? If it's faithful, then you have a word and. The next word is typically going to be conjugated or represented in the same grammatical way as the word that precedes and. So faithful, honest. Question 2, the paper division is showing an increased blank. Profit, profiting, profitable, profits. Very similar situation. Suffixes are different, similar root. In this case, it's profit, right? So maybe in question 1, the learner is struggling with identifying, whether an adjective exists after was, if it's a participle, if it's a noun, what comes after a conjugated verb in this context, what is suitable. Maybe it's an adverb. Who knows? And this is what students or learners need to question. This kind of activity is great for learners if they're willing to be honest with themselves. I know that when I was doing this kind of work in an undergrad, studying Spanish, French, and Arabic, and even Latin, I kind of brushed over these things thinking it wasn't that important, but in reality it is. These are the nuts and bolts of a language system. If the information is public, blank is neither unreasonable nor unethical to share it. If the information is public, blank is neither unreasonable nor unethical to share it. His, him, its, it. What are those? Maybe you want to read the question first. Maybe you want to look at the options first. What are they trying to quiz you on? What do they want to know that you know? Next week's seminar ought to provide blank with a lot of new information. We, our, ourselves, or us. Well, these right here, they're pronouns. So if the information is public, blank is neither unreasonable nor unethical to share it. So in this context, information is the subject, right? Well, information is an inanimate object. And in English, it's a Germanic language, but we don't really identify objects with masculine or feminine pronouns, or using, articles connected to masculine energy or feminine energy. We don't do that. We just usually use it, which is genderless or neutral, the neuter form. So if the information is public, it is neither unreasonable nor unethical to share it. But again, if a language speaker comes into this test being a non-native speaker, and their first language does make information feminine, for example, in Spanish and French, la información, or in French, la information, in that case, it would make sense that it would be a feminine situation, but in this context, that's not an option. So it's or it. The only context in English when that does occur is if it's personification of inanimate objects, or that's pretty much it, just personification. Great example is when a guy or a female could be a female when they say the car she is, or they give a car a female name, right? And the second one, next week's seminar ought to provide blank with a lot of new information. In this context, it's us. So some of my students at the time, learners, they chose ourselves, which points to a specific type of pronoun that they might be struggling with. So this would be reflexive pronouns versus object pronouns, right? Understanding the differences. So that's what you would study. After that, we just have the answer sheets. So students can quiz themselves and check their own answers. And if they're being honest with themselves, they'll be able to identify what specifically they need to study for the sentence completion questions that they'll see on the TOEIC exam. Again, thank you everybody for watching this video, and I hope it was very helpful. If you have any questions or concerns, you're always welcome to email me. That would be william.s.red25@gmail.com. That is my professional email. I hope everyone has a great rest of the semester and enjoy your day.